Welcome allesammen back to the roots of this channel. Taking a break from it for a while, but going to be getting back. It's how a lot of you guys first found me, uncovering the symbolism and real meaning behind the gods and deities in Norse mythology. Like I always say, guys, the Norse religion, it just has so much more to offer than the gods and the mythology. You know, so many people focus on the gods and mythology, but this is just a fraction of the sources that we have on what our actual spirituality and the practice of it was like. And it's really not the most important thing. That's why I stayed away from gods and mythology for a little while, in hopes that others would begin to see that. But hey, if you guys want it, I'll give it to you. I'll still be releasing a ton of videos coming up on the comparison between the Greek and Norse religion, because that is so important. That's the most valuable comparison of the ancient sources that we have to learn about our Norse religion, actually. And I'll still be releasing a big series on shamanism over the next couple months as promised. But I am going to be getting back to doing videos on the true meanings of the gods. So everybody write down below in the comments which gods you would like to see most of, and I will do that, whichever ones get the most votes. Yggdrasil, however, is the most important for my shamanism series going forward. And Yggdrasil, the world tree, is maybe, it's not the most important symbol in the Norse religion, but it's the most important one that we understand from all pagan traditions from around the world. This is the one symbol where we can see parallels in almost every pagan culture's cosmology, and it's actually quite easy to tie it all together. So I'm going over all the sources in the Norse religion about Yggdrasil, but in this video I'm doing it a little differently. I'm actually going to give you the answer right at the start as to what it really means. The scholars and philologists and anthropologists will argue all day about what is right. Some will say that Yggdrasil represents Irminsul, the massive pillar where the Germanic tribes regarded as their Mecca and the center of the earth. Other scholars regard Yggdrasil as a symbolic of other sacred trees around the Germanic world where humans would meet for their legal cases and rituals. Other theories of scholars relate the world tree as symbolic of our own bodies and even the body of the earth as a whole. Most scholars, though, will tie the Norse myths about Yggdrasil and relate it to what is called the Axis Mundi, which is kind of a concept mainly from Eastern Siberian shamanism, but it's present in shamanic traditions all around the world. The Axis Mundi is basically the symbolic path. It is a tree, by the way. It is usually manifested as a tree that is symbolic of the path that humans can take in order for their souls to ascend into other realms during ritual. Many Native American cultures have the same view, by the way, Siberian cultures and different places from around the world that I will go into, and this is regarded as the most likely explanation for what Yggdrasil is. Then finally, another theory worth mentioning, we have good old Varg, who relates Yggdrasil, the world tree, to the placenta. Very interesting when you look at pictures like that. So all these people want to argue and show that they are smarter than the opposite side. Lucky for all of you, I'm a dumbass. Who knows he's a dumbass? So all of these theories are right, except they're the exact same thing if we are just a bit creative and kind of tie the pieces together. And with some understanding of animism and sympathetic magic, Yggdrasil is actually the easiest thing in our myths to understand the true meaning of. Yggdrasil is it's symbolic of the path that we take to ascend or descend into other realms, that our soul goes on this journey. Just like it carries a shaman's soul into the upper world or underworld, it gives us a path to connect with these places in ritual, like our Irminsul or other sacred trees for the Germanic people. Also, same thing, just like the placenta, brings us from the underworld in order to be reborn into this world. All the theories you see, Yggdrasil has the same function. It's the path, it's the axis that we all travel upon to cross into other realms. So without further ado, let's get to the sources. We always start with the etymology. The general accepted meaning of Yggdrasil is Odin's horse. That's simply in Old Norse, that's what it means. Drasil is the word for horse, and Ygr, which is another name for Odin, that Odin is referred to by, it means, Ygr means the terrifying one. So remember that one, because I'm going to come back to that in a minute. There is a lesser, so that's the most common etymology that is recognized, but there's also a lesser known one proposed by Franz Schröder, and he basically says that Yggdrasil means yew pillar. Igja coming from Proto-Germanic Igvia, meaning yew tree, and Rasil from Proto-Germanic der, meaning like support or elevated, so linking it to pillar. So you see there how it could have a connection to Irminsul, which was a massive pillar that was viewed as the center of the world and utmost sacred place among the Germanic tribes. Just a little bonus theory. But yeah, generally agreed upon that Yggdrasil simply means Odin's horse. Okay, that's cool. Let's get on to the sources. The main connection to the etymology of Yggdrasil, meaning Odin's horse, comes from the Old Norse famous poem Havamal, where Odin hangs in a tree for 9 nights, where he learned the sacred runes. So the idea is that Odin hangs from a tree, and this is a metaphor for him riding the tree, therefore making the tree his symbolic horse, Yggdrasil. Okay, so that sounds reasonable according to the etymology, but what scholars forget about all this is that Odin's horse is also Sleipnir. The 8-legged horse, Sleipnir's name, actually means the slippery one or the sliding one. Now what Sleipnir is the force that represents our hugr, our souls, to slide in and out of our body in order to make journeys into other realms. See my video I did on Sleipnir, I go over all the attestations of him. So you can see the connection to Yggdrasil there. Yggdrasil, one of its functions, as scholars have also brought to attention, is to pose as the axis mundi, like the plane on which shamans can travel into other realms, just like Sleipnir is the force that our soul rides in order to travel into these other realms. So are the two one and the same? I don't know. Either way, you can see how they are very closely related. Let's look a bit closer at the sources. Havamal, these very famous words that are always quoted whenever you read something about the runes. Just be aware that Yggdrasil is not mentioned at all in this poem, but scholars assume that this tree in these stanzas are of course referring to Yggdrasil. When I hung on the tree, hung for 9 nights, with the spear I was wounded, offered or sacrificed myself to myself. And then he looks down and screaming, he took up the runes. And then he basically goes on to say how he learned the magic songs from the son of Bölthorn, Odin's grandfather, by the way. And then the next section of Havamal goes into what is called Ljóðatal, which are the magic spells that Odin says that he knows how to sing. So all of this is generally believed among the scholars to reflect some sort of shamanic ritual that humans really did, okay? That they would tie themselves hanging up in a tree in order to travel to different realms, send their soul into different realms for some sacred knowledge. We have records of Eastern shamanism and spirituality doing similar things like that. And honestly, we have many folk tales from around the world, and they all have this one thing in common. It's like the hero of the tale being suspended in some place on the axis mundi, in between the heavens and the earth, and from that ritual or practice they acquire some sort of sacred knowledge, just like Odin goes. It's too long to go into all those stories here, but just Google axis mundi and folk tales around that, and you will see exactly what I mean and how similar they are. So, this is an absolute perfect example of sympathetic magic, which I always talk about on this channel. We are imitating one act to bring upon the same effects in hopes that with the goal of doing that. A voodoo doll is the perfect example of sympathetic magic, but most rituals can actually be tied to this term. The axis mundi, the plane to transcend into different realms, is viewed as a tree in all spiritualities around the world. So we tie ourselves onto this tree with the goal that our own hugr, our souls, can slip out of our body and transcend into different realms. It's pretty simple. This is not just an Eastern belief, by the way, guys. We have a variety of sources in the Germanic tradition over the years that connect hanging in trees to certain rituals and otherworld journeys. I did a whole video on all those sources here, and you can check those out if you'd like. And again, the Scandinavian and Sami people, the Scandinavian indigenous Sami people, they are related culturally to the Siberian shamanic tradition. And that's where the Norse learned a lot of their spirituality from. So the question isn't, did the Norse and the Sami have, and the Siberians all share similar beliefs about this world tree and shamanism? Of course they did. The question is just whether this belief was present in Germanic culture before the Viking Age, when our sources come from. I argue that this ritual was present in Germanic culture because we have remnants of this tradition in German folklore going way after the Viking Age. Again, check out that video that I did and you will see. Just a note though, apparently, if you hang yourself up in a tree for 9 nights, you will travel to the other world beneath the roots where no one knows, and you will learn the runes, just like Odin did, or any other hidden wisdom from the underworld. It's just runes in this case, but like I said, there are stories from all around the world, and they all relate to attaining some sort of sacred knowledge. Guys, don't hang yourself from a tree. Even if you tie a rope around your chest or some body part that's not going to kill you, it might seriously injure you, especially if you go 9 nights with no food or drink like Odin did. That might kill you, okay? So don't do that. But I will say, I have some very powerful stories and experiences about this. I don't go into those things out in the open here on YouTube, but I do on the Patreon. So do we need to hang ourselves to transcend and get into these other realms? No, of course not. There are many ways other ways to do this, to travel along this axis mundi in like a shamanic ritual. Hanging on a tree is just one of the more extreme methods we have recorded. I will say though, get in a hammock, tie a hammock around a tree, take a nap or do some meditation just for a little while and see what you feel. Trees are incredibly powerful things. We don't need a shaman guide to show us how to do that. I will say though, if you do it, it needs to be a natural material. Don't use any rubber or plastic on the hammock, because that will prevent all those electrons and all that energy from passing through from those trees into you, and you will not get the effects, which you will see, and I might speak about on Patreon. So, next source, or next theory, I should say, our beloved Varg also has an interpretation of this myth. You guys always ask me about Varg. I don't agree with all of his interpretations on the myth, but I definitely agree with most of them. They're great. Absolutely, I like this one. He says that these stanzas are symbolic of our births when we are in the womb. He relates the tree that Odin hangs from to the placenta. Okay, that sounds very, very possible. That sounds right. That part in the next stanza about being wounded by a spear, the spear being Gungnir, Odin's spear that never misses its target, just like the umbilical cord coming from the placenta always hits its mark from the placenta attaching to the baby's navel. The no food and drink for 9 nights. Varg says that this is symbolic of the 9 months of pregnancy, and he relates the picking up of the runes to the hidden knowledge that is transferred to us from the placenta from previous lives when we are born. You know, runes, translated from Old Norse, literally means like secrets or hidden wisdom. So absolutely makes sense. I like that video a lot. I'm summarizing this theory very quickly, but you guys can check it all out in his book right here. I like his books a lot. Only thing is that he often leaves out connections to other spiritual beliefs from around the world and parallels. When this one here is clearly identical, it's the exact same thing, guys. Again, it's an example of sympathetic magic. Just like the fetus, the baby, hangs from the placenta in the mother's womb in order to obtain that secret wisdom and transcend into other realms when they are born. A shamanic ritual of tying yourself to a tree for 9 nights, it does the exact same thing. It's an imitation. It is sympathetic magic, or imitative magic as it's sometimes called, transcending into the next realm for sacred wisdom. That's probably where this ritual first started. They learned it from watching the babies attached to the placenta, and they thought, oh wow, the placenta, that looks like a tree. Oh, what happens if we tie ourselves up to this tree? This could be an ancient ritual, one of the most ancient ones that we have. Next sources, we will go into the Poetic Edda poems, more of those. Völuspor. In Ash I know, Yggdrasil is its name. With water the giant tree is wet, all this you can read. I won't spend a lot of time here because a lot of this is explained in more depth in the Prose Edda, which I will speak about in a minute. But yeah, these are the Norns referred to who are living by Ödri's will, which is said in other sources to be below the roots of Yggdrasil in the Underworld. So the Norns are also in the Underworld, or in some sources actually about Yggdrasil. They are in the realm of the gods. They are in the realm of the Aesir, but in here it definitely seems like Underworld. So below Yggdrasil's roots is where they carve the fates of men into pieces of wood in this source, but in other sources it's weaving the fates of men. So we may be able to have a shamanic journey into the underworld and visit the Norns too. But I think this part in this attestation of Yggdrasil, it's more about referring to when we are dead. When we are dead, when we were in the underworld waiting to be reborn, the Norns carve our fate before we are born, and that is when we transcend up the world tree into Earth in our realm to be born. That other part where the tree is being kept green by wetting it with white water, I'm not sure about the symbolism behind that. Any ideas, you guys can let us know in the comments as always. And the last stanza here is referring to how Yggdrasil will shake and tremble when the Ragnarok comes. So whatever Ragnarok is, the Axis Mundi will shake and allow giants to enter our realm, as foretold in other sources as well. Next poem is Grimnismal, where Odin is being tortured between 2 fires and he gets a glimpse into Valhalla and other realms in Old Norse cosmology that he tells about. He tells the young Agnar in this poem. So this, by the way, it might even be another potential way to travel along the Axis Mundi into other realms, being tortured between 2 fires. So neither of those or the hang from the tree thing sound very pleasant, but like I said, there are many other ways to do this. But here are the stanzas. So when Thor goes to Yggdrasil, he needs to wade through 3 springs, which are named here. Apparently, because the god's bridge, Åsbru, referring to the Bifrost, is for sure burning. So Thor has to find another way to reach Yggdrasil. Pay attention to that one as well, because I will come back to that in the end. Next stanza lists the names of some of the horses that the gods will ride to Yggdrasil. Again, referring to the time of Ragnarok. So the significance of these horses, I don't know, but their names are all here, translated from Old Norse. See, these are all, symbolic of something, guys. Just these names are very, very vague, and we're not exactly sure what. What are those symbolic of? To me, it sounds like a list of tools or ingredients needed. You look at that. Gold-topped, hollow-hoofed, swift-going, silver-topped, sinewy. It sounds like an ingredient kit for some certain ritual. I don't know, though. Let me know what you guys think. Just notice that all of these horses, Sleipnir, Odin's main horse, is not mentioned. Another reason why I believe Sleipnir and Yggdrasil are actually one and the same thing, or maybe just 2 different manifestations of the same thing, the Axis Mundi. Next stanzas tell us where the three roots of Yggdrasil are, and after that it tells us about the creatures who reside on Yggdrasil, with the eagle at the top, unnamed eagle, the serpent named Nidhöggr at the bottom, and the squirrel Hriatatöskr that travels up and down and relays messages between the two. There are also 4 deer that are named here. So for me, guys, these animals are very, very clearly the chakras. Their functions and even their names line up wonderfully with the Hindu chakras related to, which are of course related to the Norse tradition through Indo-European, origin. See my video I did on that. This is just my opinion, though. Note that I haven't heard any other scholars draw that connection to the chakras from the Vedic tradition. And guys, I found out after finishing this video that the human body actually in Kabbalism and also Hinduism and Buddhism can be symbolic of a pillar and an axis of the earth, just like the axis mundi. So now I'm even more sure that this theory is correct. On a darker note, the next 2 stanzas about Yggdrasil, there are more serpents there beneath the ash and all these things. These are all referring to the many snakes beneath the roots of Yggdrasil, and how the biggest one, Nidhöggr, gnaws its roots, with reference to the lowest part of the underworld where most evil men go when they die in order to suffer. So we speak about snakes in the underworld in a podcast I did with Survive the Jive earlier last year, not that long ago. Watch that one for some great info why the underworld is filled with snakes. I also recommend you guys all watch his video that he did on Yggdrasil, because he goes into a lot more depth with the kind of more distantly related connections to the world tree, whereas me in this video I'm focusing on the direct attestations and trying to make sense out of them. But great video, great guy. I recommend you all check out his channel if you haven't already. We can then speak about Yggdrasil. We're done with the Poetic Edda. We can speak about the attestations and the Prose Edda. Just be aware that this was written by a Christian, Snorri, a couple hundred years after the Viking Age, and it's a less reliable source than the Poetic Edda poems, which I just went over, of course. So there are quite a few details about Yggdrasil in the Poetic Edda Gylfaginning section, so I'm listing them all here in bullet points, going over them quickly. High says the holiest place of the gods. It is the Ash Yggdrasil. There the gods must hold their courts each day. Just as High says that Yggdrasil is the biggest and best of all trees, and that its branches extend out over all the world and reach out over into the sky. 3 of the roots of the tree support it. 1 of the roots of the tree go to the home of the Aesir, and under that root is what is called Urdabrunir, Urd's well, where the gods hold their meetings. The 2nd root goes to the Jotnar, and the one in Jotunheim leads to Mimir's Mimir's well, where Odin cuts out his eye and leaves it for the sacred wisdom there. And the 3rd route goes over Niflheim, and there the route is gnawed at by the serpent Nidhöggr, and beneath that root is the spring called Vergelmir. Okay, so there are some inconsistencies there in the Prose Edda compared to the Poetic Edda, but in general it's in agreement with the Poetic Edda sources. Another chapter in Gylfaginning, High tells of the creatures that live on Yggdrasil. Again, he tells of the squirrel Hriatatöskr, who runs up and down Yggdrasil, carrying malicious messages between the eagle at the top and Nidhöggr at the bottom at its roots, just like is told about in the Poetic Edda as well. But what it goes into in addition here is that between the eyes of the eagle at the top of Yggdrasil is a hawk called Verðrfölnir. And this is what we think could represent the 3rd eye. It's Maria Kvilhaug's book where I first read that theory. And that Maria Kvilhaug's book is my favorite for the interpretations on the Norse myth, so I recommend everyone check that out as well. And again, when I recommend books, guys, I don't. It doesn't mean I agree with everything these people say. Just say they're good books. If I recommend them, they're great books and have great theories and great sources. But it doesn't mean I agree with everything that they say. Next part of the Prose Edda, High tells that the Norns, who live under the root near Yggdrasil, they wet the tree there with its water, the well's water, and coat it with mud so that the branches of Yggdrasil do not rot away. Also, in that section, it says that the dew that falls from Yggdrasil it goes to the earth, and this is what we call honeydew, and it's how bees are fed. I don't have any ideas on the meaning behind those two parts of it, but as always, anyone down below in the comments, you can let us know if you have any ideas or theories. The final part of Gylfaginning in the Prose Edda says that one day Odin will ride to Mimisbrunir and consult Mimir. After this, Yggdrasil will tremble when Ragnarok is here, and nothing on earth or the heavens will remain unafraid. After that is when the final Ragnarok battle will take place. And remember, Mimir, he is attested as a giant in kind of the mythological texts, in the Prose Edda and the Poetic Edda, kind of a giant residing in another realm. But remember, Mimir in Heimskringla and Ynglinga saga, Mimir is attested as a real man who lived, and Odin, who was also a real man who lived in the east, somewhere around Troy area, or even the Caucasus, even where the Scythia area where they came from, and that Mimir was a spiritual leader, and he died. He was killed by the Vanir and given back to the Aesir, and Odin preserved his head with herbs and magic spells, and he kept his head with him. So this reflects yet another shamanic type ritual to transcend along the Axis Mundi, the world tree, where he would go into the underworld, consult this head that he carried along with him everywhere he go, and receive sacred wisdom from the underworld. So that is just a difference between, we can say, the mythological texts and the text that that is commonly regarded as historically accurate, or at least that's what it says. So that's all for the sources. I forgot one. One more comes in Skaldskaparmal, where Yggdrasil is only referred to there once, and it's referred to as the pole of the earth. Okay, very, very important. Remember that. So that's all for the sources. I've covered the theory about Yggdrasil being the Axis Mundi and relating it to Eastern shamanism. I've even covered how Yggdrasil can represent the human body as a whole, or a placenta. To finish the video, we need to cover the theory of Yggdrasil being linked to Irminsul, and how does all of this relate to Ragnarok. So I think it's very clear that humans were attracted to these massive old trees or great pillars or high mountains, things like that, but especially in the Germanic tradition, trees and pillars, because this resembled Yggdrasil. This is exactly what Irminsul was. It was a massive pillar reaching far into the sky that was regarded as the most sacred place for all the Germanic peoples and regarded as their center of the earth. It's not that they believed that this pillar itself was Yggdrasil. They saw this massive pillar and they said, okay, it looks like Yggdrasil. So that's why they choose these things, this pillar as their sacred central place where they would hold their meetings, just as the gods did by the roots of Yggdrasil near the well. Humans would also practice their rituals and spiritual practices, and this area near this big pillar or a sacred tree, whatever it was, we're not quite sure, with the goal that it would help with any shamanic type rituals of transcending into other realms. Again, sympathetic magic and animism, that always comes back to this. So there are a lot of things in our mythology, linking Yggdrasil to Irminsul or other sacred places in Germanic tradition too. First, what I just spoke about in Skaldskaparmal, Yggdrasil there was referred to as being the pole or the pillar of the earth, okay? Just like Irminsul. Also, how the Prose Edda, high in the Prose Edda, says that the holiest of places where the gods hold their courts was at Yggdrasil. We know that the Germanic tribes held their courts at Irminsul, and after Irminsul was destroyed, by the way, just before the Viking Age, the Norse pagans still held their courts at sacred places near a very old tree or a grove. Also tells in how in Grimnismal, the poem, Thor had to wade through 3 springs in order to get to Yggdrasil. Again, Irminsul was attested as being, and pretty much every other sacred place in the Norse tradition was attested as being near a natural spring. Note how also 2 roots of Yggdrasil are located near some sort of well. Okay, Mimisbrunner and Urdabrunner. It's not just the Norse world, but even the ancient Greek world. Their temples and their most holiest of places, with Delphi, which I was at last summer, it had sacred springs there as well. And in the Greek tradition, Delphi was regarded as the center of the earths. Closely related to what else in Greco-Roman mythology? The Axis Mundi. This is commonly is what is referred to as the Axis Mundi in Greek and Roman mythology, just like Irminsul was regarded as the center of the earth to the Germanic peoples. What was the center of the earth, Delphi, called in the Greek beliefs? It was called Omphalos. The navel, literally translated, the navel of the earth is what they called it, just like the belly button, just like in Varg's theory. Yggdrasil is the placenta, and it is connected by Gungnir to the umbilical cord, and that is connected to the navel of the newborn. And very interestingly enough, that humans regarded, or at least the Greeks regarded their center, their axis mundi, their center of the world, they literally called it the navel. So it's also very possible that this massive pillar for the Germanic peoples, and parallel to the Greeks, that this massive Irminsul pillar reaching up into the sky was regarded by the Germanic peoples as the umbilical cord attaching to the navel of the earth, just like that similar sacred place was in the Greek beliefs. So for me, guys, there is just too much of all this, linking it all together for it to be a coincidence. So yeah, I believe that all of the above theories are true, and Irminsul was our symbolic Yggdrasil. I'll touch on Ragnarok for just a bit before I finish the video. How Yggdrasil is attested in the sources, how Yggdrasil is going to tremble before Ragnarok comes. One of the many reasons why people chose to live near Irminsul is perhaps because they would be the first ones to get the sign of this thing. Also, as foretold about Ragnarok, all but 2 humans will end up dying. The surviving humans' names are Lif and Lifthrasir, and they survive Ragnarok and Fimbulvinter by taking refuge in a place called Hod Mimir's Holt, or Hord Mimir's woodland, like Mimir's well, that is located below one of the roots of Yggdrasil. So there are many scholars who have suggested that Hod Mimir's Holt is actually referring to Yggdrasil, which makes it yet another reason why humans regarded Irminsul as the sacred place that they wanted to live nearby, because that would be the place where humans would be able to survive Ragnarok should it come. Guys, I've spoken about this for some time now, and lately I've been even more sure about it, researching some of the science and these cataclysmic events that have happened in humans' history, how scholars have theorized for a long time too that the Ragnarok was some sort of catastrophic natural disaster. I'm in 100% belief that this is referring to these cataclysmic events where the poles of the earth flip over, they shift, We know that this has happened many times before in the history of the world. If any of you haven't seen Graham Hancock's new documentary, you really should. Just for the sake of humanity, you should. Okay, yeah, he's a bit wild and kooky, and he's been proven wrong sometimes, but there's a lot of confirmed science in there. And when you hear about the events that took place at this cataclysmic pole shift of the Earth, you will start to notice a disturbing amount of parallels in our mythology about the Ragnarok, okay? So Yggdrasil, Irminsul, or wherever else humans believed this central part of the earth to be, it would maybe be thought of the one place that stayed, stable while the rest of the earth flipped on its axis, killing everyone else. Guess what? Coming back to the idea that Yggdrasil is the Axis Mundi from Eastern Shamanism. And guess what else Axis Mundi means? Axis Mundi means the axis of the earth in Latin, which is a concept from Greco-Roman astronomy. So not only is this Axis Mundi a plane and a location where shamans can travel and ascend into other realms, but the Axis Mundi is a location, the axis point of the earth, which stays still when the rest of the world shifts and has a hell of a bad time, actually. So the axis point on which the world may potentially revolve around any, cataclysmic shift of the poles. I know what you're all thinking. Okay, if this is all true, and this axis point will be a safe zone during the next catastrophic event, where is it? Well, that's the problem. The Germanic peoples thought that their Axis Mundi was Irminsul. We're not sure where that is, but it would be someplace in the northwestern Germany area. The Greeks thought that their Axis Mundi was at Delphi. Every culture in the world has their own belief that it is somewhere near them. So we're shit out of luck there. We don't really know where it's going to be. All we know is that there would be two Axis Mundis on the Earth, two the opposite side of the Earth, while the whole rest of the Earth shifts, the poles shift. And I don't know. Believe whatever you want. All I can do here is speak about the sources, theories, and tell you what I believe at least, but do your research, form your own beliefs, and as always, if you have any other ideas linking the sources together, please share with us down below. That's why I make these videos, it's so we can all put our minds together and discover the lost beliefs of our people. But that's all I have to say for this video. Hope you enjoyed. Vi ses nästa gång.